Florida's dawn stretches over dew-drenched grass. A gentle breeze brushes through the palm trees, carrying moisture and the scent of freshly cut lawns. At the edge of the fairway, a 62-year-old man stands still, hands gripping a club, back slightly hunched, steps heavy. His knees tremble faintly. His eyes squint under the rising Sunday. No applause, no cameras, just his rasping breath and the sharp crack of a swing echoing in the vast emptiness. The ball soars, then falls, rolling slowly across the wet grass. That man is Vijay Singh, a legend from the small island of Fiji, who once made the world bow to his will and talent. For 2 decades, he was a symbol of resilience and discipline, a solitary warrior in a sport reserved for the privileged. 3 major titles: PGA Championship 1998, the Masters 2000, PGA Championship 2004, and 34 PGA Tour victories earned him a place in the World Golf Hall of Fame, making him one of the greatest golfers ever. In 2004, he surpassed Tiger Woods to become world #1, a feat few dared to dream. His swings were not just technique but a message. A son of a poor island nation could triumph over the system. He arrived at the course before dawn and left after dark, practicing until his hands bled. That glory came not from luck but from thousands of hours of grueling work. But today, in the quiet of Pontevedra Beach, that glory is just a distant echo. No more cheering crowds, no blinding lights, only a weary body, a back braced with metal, knees swollen from years of battling injuries. Each swing now is a challenge against his own betraying body. The days of triumph are gone, the world that once celebrated him now silent. Yet in those time-worn eyes, a fierce fire still burns. He no longer plays to win but to live, to remind himself that a legend isn't born from luck but from the courage to push through pain. There was a time he ruled the green fairways. Now, the grass hides his pain. At 62, Vijay Singh still steps onto the course each morning, fighting through every ache, repeating the swing that shaped his life. Behind the gleaming trophies is a heart once shattered but never extinguished. If you believe in the power of rising from ashes, stay, because what he's endured will stir your soul. Summer rain pours over Lautoka like silver curtains, pounding the rusted tin roof of a small seaside house. In a low-ceilinged kitchen, a frail mother folds old clothes, while the father, Mohan Singh, a mechanic and golf coach at the local club, sits polishing an old iron, his calloused hands stained with grease. He's stern, rarely speaks, and seldom smiles. Vijay, the young son, sits a few steps away, carving a piece of wood into a club handle, his eyes glinting in the dim glow of an oil lamp. In that house, no one speaks words of warmth. "I'm proud of you," is never uttered. Only silence, only expectations, only the rain blending with the sound of metal on wood. Vijay grows up amid the smell of rust, salty sea air, and dreams of lush green fairways he could only glimpse through fences. In Fiji, golf wasn't for people like them. It was a pastime for wealthy tourists, British, Australian, American men, white men in crisp clothes, polished shoes, laughing at the kids peering through the barriers. The brown-skinned boy, barefoot in tattered shorts, clutching a club his father carved from a broomstick, could only hit balls on the sandy lot behind the house. Real golf balls were too costly, so he used dried coconuts, stones, even fallen lemons from the backyard. Each clean strike fueled his vision of standing at Augusta National, a place people like him were never allowed. When the rain stopped, under a deep purple sky, he lingered on the sand, hands blistered, sweat mixing with sand and tears. No one believed that boy would amount to anything, but in Vijay's dark eyes burned a small flame, fragile but unquenchable. His father taught golf to rich white men who called him "Sir," but when they saw Vijay trailing behind, they smirked, "Maybe one day he'll caddy for us." Vijay stayed silent, gripping his club until his knuckles whitened. At night, when the course closed, he snuck through the fence, scavenging old balls left in the rough, practicing in the dark, guided only by the feel of the clubs striking earth. Rain fell, his shirt soaked, but he didn't stop. Each swing was a silent vow that the world would know his name. His mother, worried, said, "Son, people like us can't live on golf. Learn a trade." But he just smiled, eyes fixed on the sea. "If I don't try, how will I know?" In the village school's small classroom, Vijay sat at the back, doodling clubs and balls instead of doing math. The teacher sighed. Classmates laughed. He didn't bother explaining. His mind was on green fairways, roaring crowds, and the cheers of people who'd never heard of Fiji. Vijay's first wounds weren't from poverty, but from the scornful looks of others, forcing a child to harden too soon. Once, a course manager chased him off the practice area, shouting, "This isn't your place." Vijay bowed his head, gathered his club, and walked home through the rain, lips bitten until they bled. That night, by the door, he stared at the distant course lights and whispered to himself, "One day, I'll stand there, not outside the fence." His world was small, but his heart held a universe of dreams. He knew no privilege, had no opportunities, but possessed something the rich kids never understood: a hunger for recognition, the pain of being belittled, and a will to prove his worth with his own rough hands. Watching his father polish clubs, that stern face became a symbol of fear, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. His father never praised him, but in his eyes was something else, a quiet hope, buried under the toughness of a man who knew life spared no weakness. And Vijay, though never hearing "I'm proud of you," silently vowed to do the one thing that could make his father look up. Each morning, as sunlight hit the sea, he carried his club and a few old balls to the sand, practicing until the sand burned his feet. He hit toward the sun, as if piercing the invisible wall between dreams and reality. The game was made for the privileged, a voice carries on the wind, but for that brown-skinned boy, it was his only rebellion. One afternoon, as the sunset stained the water red, Vijay stood on a small hill overlooking the sea, hair wet, shoulders drenched, still clutching his wooden club. The day's last light shimmered on the water like a path to another world where people knew his name. He gripped the club, eyes blazing, and whispered through ragged breaths, "One day, they will see me too." In 1985, at the Indonesian Open, a nightmare struck Vijay Singh. Amid Jakarta's thick, humid heat, on an unfamiliar course, the young man from Fiji felt he was inching closer to his greatest dream until, in one afternoon, it all collapsed. A cold accusation emerged. Vijay Singh accused of altering his scorecard. No clear evidence, no fair investigation, just a headline and rumors spreading like wildfire. Asian newspapers condemned him. People who once shook his hand or smiled at him suddenly went silent, avoiding him. Overnight, the image of the resilient Fijian turned into cheater. In one headline, a voice intones heavily, a career was erased. One errant swing, one vague signature, and the world's doors slammed shut before him. Asian Tour officials, avoiding trouble, banned him. No one defended him, no one asked if he'd truly done it. Vijay begged for a chance to explain, but no one listened. In the eyes of those who once called him friend, he saw doubt, and that hurt more than the verdict. One day, he packed his things, stuffed a few old clubs into a bag, and left the hotel in silence. No one saw him off, no goodbyes, just the feeling of a man erased from the world. In the years that followed, Vijay became a wanderer in the sport he loved. No tours, no stage. He took a job teaching golf in Malaysia at a resort for the wealthy. They paid to hear tips from a former pro, unaware or uncaring that he was banned. By day, he stood under the sun, teaching them how to grip, swing, stance. At night, he returned to a cramped dorm, a creaky fan, and a leaking ceiling. Each evening, he polished his worn clubs until the steel reflected his face, a face of a man whose honor was stolen too young. Sometimes, rain fell on the tin roof, wind howled through the window, and he sat motionless for hours, listening to water drip on metal like a clock ticking away a forgotten life. Was it all for nothing? He whispered in the dark. The question needed no answer. He knew no one heard. At 22, he'd tasted the bitterness of rejection, not from failure, but from a world that judged him without a chance to speak. Sometimes he dreamed of returning to the course, hearing crowds cheer, seeing his name flash on leaderboards. But waking brought only the leaking ceiling and rain on glass. The next morning, he'd go back to the course, smiling at sunglass, wearing guests, listening to them complain about swings off by inches. When they patted his shoulder, saying, "Good coach," he smiled. But inside he was hollow. No one knew the man teaching them was an athlete exiled from his own dream. The golf world he once thought fair and pure was full of judgment, envy, and prejudice. A brown-skinned man from an unknown island, Vijay knew no one truly wanted him back. But in those grueling years, his resolve was forged. No longer the naive Fiji boy peering through fences, he became a quiet, relentless man, living to prove them wrong. One night, during the season's heaviest rain, Vijay went to the resort's back course, swinging through the downpour. Each swing sprayed water, each strike against the ground a defiance. "I'm still here," he said softly, "and I'll come back." No one saw, no one clapped, but in that moment, amid mud and rain, he was reborn in silence. Years later, he clawed his way back through smaller tournaments, then Europe, rising step by step the only way he knew relentless work, not because he was forgiven, but because he couldn't do anything else. For Vijay Singh, golf wasn't just a job, it was his identity, his reason to exist. If he stopped, his entire life before would dissolve into nothing. He didn't keep going because he was innocent. He kept going because he couldn't be anyone else. In the early 1990 seconds, as Vijay Singh's name faded into obscurity, he started over from nothing again. No spotlight, no sponsors, no teammates, just a Fijian man with calloused hands and a battered faith. He left Malaysia, carrying an old golf bag and a little money, heading to Europe. On the cold fairways of the European Tour, he quietly played round after round, traveling by train between countries, sleeping in cheap hotels, eating instant noodles, and practicing until his fingers bled. Each morning, he stepped onto the course before the fog lifted, shoes soaked, repeating a swing hundreds of times. They called him the hardest worker on tour, but to him, it wasn't praise, it was survival. No one left to prove anything to, no one to forgive. Only one question in his heart: would the world ever accept him again? In 1993, his first European Tour win came slowly, like a drop of salvation. It didn't make him famous, but it signaled he still existed. Year by year, season by season, he climbed the rankings, skin weathered by sun, clubs worn by wind. Finally, in 1998, on American soil where he'd once been rejected, where the sport was born, Vijay Singh stood on the winner's podium, PGA Championship, his first major title. As the crowd cheered, he didn't smile. He looked to the sky, eyes glistening, as if saying to himself, "They said I didn't belong here, but here I am." 2 years later, 2000, the Masters at Augusta National, the sacred ground of golf, once closed to people of color as members, where history etched the names of American icons. The Fijian man born of sand and rain donned the champion's green jacket. That image was a punch to prejudice. As he lifted the trophy, cameras captured his calm face, no elation. Only pain settled in his eyes. A voice resonates solemnly. Every swing was a forgiveness he never received. Each shot was absolution for a world that had cast him out and a way to forgive himself. But behind the applause was another truth. Vijay Singh remained an outsider. Tour colleagues shook his hand with polite smiles, then whispered behind his back, "He's good, but he's not one of us." In locker rooms, he heard jests laced with venom. While the press lauded emerging white heroes, his name was merely the man from Fiji. He knew that no matter how many trophies he won, his skin and origins would always make him a stranger in this world. The 2000s marked his brightest and loneliest chapter. He trained so relentlessly that people called him a golf machine. After tournaments, while others partied, Vijay practiced until midnight. He didn't seek joy, only the quiet of a club striking earth. In silence, he heard Florida's night rain on the practice range, echoing the rain of his Fijian childhood on a tin roof. Sometimes, he thought of his father who never spoke pride but taught him never to fall. In 2004, the pinnacle arrived. He surpassed Tiger Woods, the era's greatest legend, to become the world's #1 golfer. The world was stunned. An immigrant from a tiny island, once banned, now stood atop America's sporting system. Networks replayed him lifting trophies, reporters clamored for his feelings. But at night, in a high-rise Atlanta hotel room, Vijay sat alone. The phone on the table didn't ring. No calls from old friends, no parties, no one saying, "I'm proud of you." He poured a glass of whiskey, saw his reflection in the window, and whispered, "Victory is loud, loneliness is louder." At 41, when many were weary, he still rose before dawn, hitting the range like a ritual of survival. Some mornings, on the tee box, watching the first sunlight, everything blurred. Maybe this is what success feels like, he thought, to win everything but lose everyone. His career blazed like a fire, but it burned away the human left in him. Endless flights, rounds, endorsement deals, they filled time but not the void in his heart. Years later, asked about the peak, Vijay only smiled faintly. It wasn't a celebration, he said. It was survival. To him, victory wasn't joy but a shield against the despair that nearly drowned him in 1985. Every swing, every putt carried an obsession. One more mistake, and it could all vanish as before. So, even as the world's #1, he lived like an exile. He ate alone, trained alone, competed as if repaying an invisible debt for the years of rejection. No rest, no safety. For Vijay Singh, glory was never a reward. It was a temporary refuge in a life of unhealed wounds. One night, after his 34th career win, he stood in an empty hotel room, sweat beading on his face under the harsh lights. The trophy sat on the table, gleaming coldly. He touched its metal surface, feeling the chill spread to his palm, and realized this victory wasn't warm. It never was. In that moment, the man once cast out from Fiji understood. Some pains can't be healed by applause, and some victories only echo in solitude. Glory reached its zenith, but the silence in Vijay Singh's heart grew heavier. In 2004, as his name topped the world rankings, massive checks and endorsement deals flooded in like waves. The press hailed the PGA Tour's new hero, the man who dethroned Tiger Woods, the hardest worker of all. But amid the praise, a cold note rang out. They called him cold, robotic, emotionless. They wrote that he played like a machine, lacking the soul of an American. In every article praising his feats, a question lingered. Did a brown-skinned Fijian with an unfamiliar accent truly belong among the sport's white legends? He read those articles in silence. No reaction, no explanation, just folding the paper, setting it aside, and heading to the range as always. "They clapped for my score," he later said, "but they never invited me in." The applause, he knew, was for results they couldn't deny, not for him. To American crowds, he was a champion. In their hearts, he remained a stranger. The more he succeeded, the wider the gap grew. Colleagues offered perfunctory handshakes, but rarely invited him to dinner. He left courses as others began to party. In golf's world, where players bonded over clubs, wealth, and connections, Vijay had no place. He came from no wealthy lineage, no entrepreneurial or political parents, no American culture. He had only his clubs and his will. In a world built for white elegance, his quiet resilience was mistaken for coldness. Those years he competed relentlessly. Season after season, week after week, he became his own machine, programmed to win. Mornings, he hit the range before sunrise, practicing hundreds of putts. Evenings, as the grass darkened, he stayed on. Hands calloused, back aching, but eyes unwavering. The pressure of titles, records, and doubt left no room for pause. The more he won, the more he feared losing. The more they clapped, the lonelier he felt. His smile vanished unnoticed. In his quiet Ponte Vedra beach home, his wife, Ardina, waited. Dinner grew cold. The dining room light stayed on. Sometimes she turned on the TV, seeing her husband's taut face, cold eyes, expressionless. The media called him stone-like, exactly how he'd learned to survive. She didn't blame him, but her heart sank like lead. He's trading his health, his soul, and us, she once told a friend. In a corner, their young son Kas drew a tall man, slightly hunched, holding a golf club amid clouds. When Ardina asked, "Who's that, honey?" he replied, "It's Dad. But why's he always turning away?" Vijay rarely came home. When he did, he spoke little. Kas ran to show his drawings. Vijay gave a faint smile, patted his head, and stored his golf bag. At night, he sat alone in the backyard, watching distant lights flicker through trees, hearing the ocean's waves, recalling Fiji where a brown-skinned boy dreamed of the world. Now the world saw him, but he no longer saw himself. The American press didn't spare him. They dissected every expression, every action, every detail. One paper wrote, "He wins, but he doesn't smile. Maybe that's why we can't love him." Those words left him silent for hours. How could they understand that to survive a world that didn't welcome him, he'd learned to hide every emotion? A smile, to him, was a luxury. He withdrew further. Less talk, fewer events. Other golfers played for passion. He fought to prove he belonged. A lifelong battle, sometimes against his own doubts. Hotel nights, he'd call home, hearing Kas, "Dad, when are you coming back?" "Soon, son." But soon stretched months, years. When he returned, Kas was taller, hiding, longing behind a forced smile. On the course, he kept winning. Money poured in. At home, the dining table sat two. At an age when many retired to enjoy life, he charged forward, as if stopping would erase everything. They called him a living legend, but no one saw the exhaustion in his eyes. The cost of greatness was steep. He lost friends, intimacy, and the warmth within himself. At a press conference, a reporter asked, "How does it feel to be the first Fijian to make history?" Vijay replied softly, "Proud, but tiring." They laughed, thinking it a joke. But that night, in his hotel room, he sat still, staring out at America's glittering city below. The world's noise crashed into a single silence within him, and he knew no applause could fill that void. The crowds roared his name, but no one really knew him. In 2013, when Vijay Singh thought the darkest days were behind him, a storm hit fiercer, crueler, like a fated jest echoing after nearly 30 years. One January morning, major newspapers blared, "Singh cheated again." They reported he admitted using deer antler spray containing IGF-1, a substance banned by WADA. The golf world erupted. TV, social media, comment sections all condemned him before any investigation began. The man who spent a lifetime proving his innocence was back on trial again. Vijay told the press he didn't know the spray was banned. He'd read it, helped joint pain, and thought it harmless. But in professional sports, "I didn't know" is never an excuse. The PGA Tour launched an investigation. Though they didn't publicly suspend him, they quietly pulled him from events, withheld prize money, and let the public judge. News outlets branded him a repeat offender, a habitual cheater. Each article was a knife, slicing into the honor he'd spent a lifetime rebuilding. The few friends left on tour distanced themselves. No one wanted scandal's stain. Sponsors dropped contracts. In days, those who once posed with him at award ceremonies vanished as if they never existed. He became a social media punchline mocking memes, jeering comments, taunting tweets. The cheater from Fiji, they called him. 3 words and 3 decades of honor were erased. In his Florida home, Vijay sat in a chair, reading a paper with his name under Scandal. His hands trembled, eyes blurred not from age, but from an old pain reawakened. The ache wasn't in his knees or back, but deeper where he once believed fairness existed. He recalled 1985, the identical headlines, the contemptuous stares, the Malaysian rains, and wondered, was his life a loop that never ended? In those dark days, only his family stayed. His wife, Ardina, sat beside him, holding his hand, whispering, "We know who you are." He shook his head, eyes sunken, soul weary. "Sometimes," he replied, "I don't." The words rang like a small, painful crack in the man once called a machine of steel. The man who beat Tiger Woods, who climbed to the world's peak, now sat in silence, staring at a paper judging him a criminal. Each day, he rose and went to the range, though no one might invite him to play. Neighbors said they saw him alone at dawn, hitting the same shot over and over, silent as if atoning. To him, golf was no longer a game, but the only court he trusted. On the course, he didn't speak, smile, or explain. He just swung, as if each stroke pleaded, "See me fairly just once." That May, the PGA Tour concluded its investigation. They found no evidence he intentionally used a banned substance, but offered no apology. They merely said the matter was closed. But what needed destroying was already destroyed. His reputation was shredded on front pages, while his exoneration appeared in small print, buried in back sections. The world didn't care for truth, only for verdicts. Vijay refused silence. He sued the PGA Tour for damaging his honor, for publicizing an investigation that humiliated him before the world. The lawsuit dragged on 5 years, driven not by money but by what he'd lost too often: dignity. In 2018, it settled, with the PGA Tour stating they had no evidence Singh violated rules. But by then, who cared? The world had moved to new stories, new champions. Vijay Singh was cleared in silence, a silence bitterer than any accusation. One night, as heavy rain swept Florida, he sat in the living room, watching lightning flash through the window. The old newspaper lay on the table, edges yellowed. He didn't throw it out. It reminded him that triumph and disgrace were one headline apart. He realized in this world, a man like him needed only one mistake to be erased forever, while 1,000 rights went unnoticed. After the scandal, he spoke less, played less, appeared sparingly on the Champions Tour. But each time he stepped onto a course, spectators saw those eyes resolute, hardened, hiding an indescribable sadness. They thought him cold, but it was the last armor he had. When reporters asked, "Are you angry?" he replied, "No, I'm too tired to be angry." Another time, asked, "Are you afraid of being forgotten?" He smiled faintly, saying, "I've been used to that for a long time." And so, the man who stood atop the world returned to silence. No more cheers, no more lights, only the soft clink of ball on club in the late afternoon, echoing then fading into the wind. A legend became an icon. Then an icon was publicly executed for daring to be different. His honor wasn't stolen, it was torn apart by the same hands that once clapped for him. In Florida's darkness, as others slept, Vijay Singh sat alone, polishing an old iron, watching light glint off steel, telling himself, "They can take the applause, they can take the fame, but they'll never take what I built inside." The media storm passed, but a quieter, crueler battle began gnawing at Vijay Singh from within the fight against his own body. In 2009, he entered surgery with a swollen right knee, torn ligaments, and cartilage nearly gone from decades of relentless practice. Doctors whispered over his MRI, "How is he still walking?" Post-surgery, they warned, If you keep playing at this intensity, one wrong swing could cripple you forever. But to Vijay, stopping was scarier. Golf wasn't just a job, it was why he existed. Leaving the hospital, he refused crutches. His legs shook, each step dragging a lifetime of toil. In the months that followed, pain consumed him, his back tormenting him more. H's spread from spine to hips, hips to knees, each step a reminder that time was collecting its debt. He couldn't sleep. At night, back throbbing, he stood on the balcony watching rain, streetlights reflecting in his sunken eyes. "Everything I built was with these hands," he whispered. "Now they tremble." In 2011, his body finally forced a halt. His streak of 67 consecutive majors, the longest in professional golf, ended when he withdrew from U.S. Prive. Open qualifying. Unable to bend. He sat in a hotel bed, watching the tournament schedule on TV, his name absent. For the first time in nearly 20 years, he was no part of the stage. Outside, rain fell endlessly, drops hitting the window, blending with his weary breaths, once a symbol of endurance. But his body couldn't break his spirit. He went to physical therapy daily, walking, stretching, bending, while doctors shook their heads. Each exercise was a battle. Sweat soaked his knee brace, pain stabbed like knives. He clenched his teeth, never groaning, staring into the mirror at a face older than its years, tired but stubborn. Asked why he didn't retire, he replied softly, "Because I never played to be remembered. I played not to disappear." One day, when the pain eased slightly, he returned to the range. A muggy Florida morning, the course empty. No reporters, no spectators, no witnesses. He set a tee, placed a ball, and swung. The first shot was clumsy, the ball rolling a few yards. He winced but kept going. Second shot, third, 10th. Pain shot through his spine, but he didn't stop. Each swing declared, "I'm still here." Some days, he paused mid-round, doubled over, clutching his back, gasping. Some afternoons, he lay still on a bench, sweat soaking his shirt, tears mixing with rain. But when the pain passed, he stood again. In golf, they counted titles. Vijay counted mornings. He could still walk to the course. Doctors urged him to quit. He laughed. "Quit? I've done this my whole life. If I stop hitting balls, I don't know who I am." So he continued step by step, swing by swing, each club striking earth like a challenge to fate. To others, a body is a gift. To him, it was a battlefield. Every muscle, every joint, a potential traitor. But amid the pain, he found something else, the raw will that carried a poor Fijian boy to the world's peak. It never left, only buried under sun-darkened skin and surgical scars. One night, after a long practice, he sat alone in the darkened gym, faint light spilling from the range outside. Scattered balls lay on the floor like fragments of memory. He picked them up, placing each in a basket, each one a year of his life gone by. His hands shook, joints creaked, but his eyes still burned. An old security guard passed by, pausing. "Mr. Singh, it's late. Aren't you tired?" "Tired, yes," he replied, a faint smile. "But it's better than forgetting who I was." The guard nodded, walked away. The door closed, leaving Vijay alone in the dim range. He set another tee. Hands gripped the club, back trembling, knees clicking, but he swung. The ball soared high, lost in the black Florida sky, vanishing into the night. No one saw, no one clapped, no cheers, only the breath of a man who once ruled the world, now fighting a body that betrayed him. In that silence, as the ball faded into darkness, Vijay Singh stood still, eyes tracing its path, as if seeing his entire life in that night, a journey of pain, resilience, and unyielding pride. 2025, Florida in spring, the sky mild and salty ocean wind blowing through the palm trees around his small white house. At 62, Vijay Singh no longer graces front pages, no camera whirs, no flashing lights. His life now flows slowly, quietly like the waves lapping the shore behind his home. Each morning, he wakes at dawn, performing physical therapy rituals that have become his way of life. His back still aches, knees still throb, hands tremble when gripping the club tight, but he still goes to the course, still practices, not to compete, not for anyone to see, but just to hold on to the feeling that he's still himself. When asked why he keeps training with nothing left to prove, he simply replies, "Because this is all I am." On days he doesn't go to the course, he sits on the porch, reading about rising young golfers. Each time he sees an Asian face, a brown-skinned boy, he nods faintly, eyes flickering with a thin smile. They don't know, but the path they walk was paved with the sweat and tears of this man, the first to break through the closed doors of the system, who forced the golf world to accept that talent has no color. The house is no longer lavish. Luxury cars were sold long ago. The living room holds only an armchair, a few old photos, and a small wooden box containing tarnished medals. In that box, his past lies still 34 PGA Tour titles, 3 major trophies, a few photos with an unsmiling face. On the opposite wall hangs the painting his son Kos drew years ago, a man standing on a golf course, long shadow, hunched back but still clutching the club. Ardina still brews tea every afternoon. She rarely asks her husband about the old days, because she knows silence is sometimes the only way to keep memories from hurting. The narrator's voice lowers like an elegy. Time took his speed, fame took his peace, but faith kept his soul alive. Time took his strength, fame took his peace, but faith kept his soul alive. Each morning, he still steps out to the backyard, where a small patch of grass faces the Sunday. Each movement slow, each swing gentle, but in every motion is a lifetime of memory. Hands shake, eyes blur, but he still feels that perfect contact between club and ball. The ball rises, lost in the blue sky, not high, not far, but enough to make him smile. No one claps, no grandstands, only the wind and the steady beat of his heart, the only rhythm still tying him to life. When night falls, he sits reading old fan letters from the past. Many are yellowed, ink faded, but the words still warm. Thank you for giving me a brown-skinned kid, the belief that we can dream too. Each time he reads, his throat tightens. Perhaps that's his greatest victory, not the titles, but making the next generation believe they have a place. He never speaks of his legacy, but anyone who understands golf knows. Vijay Singh didn't just hit balls, he paved the way. He broke boundaries between skin color and fairways, prejudice and opportunity. In a golf world painted white with gloves and polo shirts, he was the foreign color, steadfast and indelible. He didn't just win, he changed the game. Time still gnaws at that body. At night, his back hurts so much he sits to sleep. Each time he picks up a ball, he uses both hands for balance, but his eyes never lose their fire. When asked if he has regrets, he says, "No, I lost many things, but I found myself in every pain." And that's the truth his entire life proves. Victory isn't standing first, but standing firm when no one believes you can. One afternoon, Kos, now a grown man, visits. Father and son sit together, watching the sun set over the sea. "Dad, if you could do it over, would you live differently?" Vijay smiles, shakes his head. "No, son, because without these wounds I wouldn't know how strong I am." That statement sums up a lifetime, a journey of blood, loneliness, and faith. Behind every trophy is a man who bled for dignity. Every trophy is a scar healed over. Every victory, a trade of body and soul. And though the world may forget, those scars remain an eternal legacy. If you ever cheered for a warrior who never fell, leave your light for Vijay Singh, the man who paid in blood, loneliness, and faith to rewrite American golf history. Share your thoughts below, and subscribe to honor with us the great souls who walked through darkness to find their own light. Because in the end, Some stories don't need victories to become immortal, just a heart that never yields. There's one thing that makes Vijay Singh's story so painfully almost unfair. He gave America everything, and most of the time America just stood and watched. This isn't just the story of a golfer with 3 major titles, 34 PGA Tour wins, who once surpassed Tiger Woods to become world #1. This is the story of the cost of stepping into a world not made for you, and still refusing to back down. From the Fijian boy hitting coconuts, mocked by white kids, to the grown man suspended from the 1,985 Indonesian Open over an unproven accusation, in one headline, a career was erased, we see the most haunting truth of his life. His honor was always something others felt entitled to decide. Even when he stood at Augusta in the 2000 Masters green jacket like a victorious outsider on America's home turf, he still ate dinner alone in his hotel room. Even when he topped Tiger to become world #1 in 2004, he spoke the cold truth. Victory is loud, loneliness is louder. And at the end of the road, when his body betrayed him, knee surgeries, metal-backed spine, trembling hands, the world didn't remember the knife-like therapy sessions, only the deer antler spray scandal, slapping him again with cheater. So what do we learn from a life like that? That America excels at celebrating achievements, but isn't always great at protecting the man behind them. That success doesn't exempt you from loneliness, doubt, or public cruelty. And also that perseverance, rising each Florida dawn at 62, back aching, eyes blurring, still saying, "Because this is all I am," is a courage this society needs to respect more. The lesson for us, living in a culture that worships quick wins and burns people faster, look closer. Remember that behind every trophy is a broken body, a family with cold dinners, a heart that rises after being publicly shamed. And if we demand people like Vijay Singh fight for our dreams, the least we can do is stand with them when the world turns away. If Vijay Singh's story of resilience and loneliness touches your heart, hit subscribe to join us in continuing to honor those who turned pain into legacy. Thank you for joining. See you in the next video, where we keep listening to the great souls still standing amid life's storms.